Prognosis EHR Practice Management Patient Portal, ClientSetup. In order to make sure the patient portal works effectively within your local practice workflow, there are some settings and configuration that can be done that defines how the patient is able to interact with your portal. And that is what we're going to cover in this video. For example, the landing page or the home page. When the patient first logs into the portal, you have the ability of customizing the patient band, the menu tabs, the table of contents, and the face sheet. Now, this landing page to the portal corresponds loosely to the encounter screen for you in the EHR. So it's where the patient is able to actually view their health information and to what extent. And that is what you're able to define within the properties that we're going to cover, in conjunction with the features and the functionality, such as the patient forms, the request of medication refills, the ability to request appointments, updating demographics and insurance information, viewing clinical progress notes and clinical summary, viewing laboratory and radiology test results, downloading or viewing or printing patient education materials relevant to their care, and for those of you who use practice management, the ability of making e-payments. Now, we're also going to look at the patient workflow because you have two options with regards to allowing new patients to do a self-register or just allowing existing patients only to log in. And within the existing patient, you have an option if they do not have an encounter yet, whether or not you want them to go ahead and complete their initial demographics and medical history or not. And then finally, we will talk about presenting the URL to the patient and the login credentials. So first of all, before we get started with the actual properties and configuration, this is what the landing page of the portal looks like, or the home page, when the patient first logs in. So in this video, we're going to discuss the configuration of this screen, which allows you to control what level of interaction your patients have while they're on the portal. I'm logged in here to Prognosis as the administrator. So under my Settings tab, I'm going to select Configuration. And here in the far right column, Admin, we're going to choose the fourth option, Properties. And the property name, I'm just going to type in the word Portal. The first one we're going to look at here is the Portal Encounter Parameters. Now this is the patient band, which is this dark blue banner across the top of the screen. By default, it shows the patient's date of birth, their last visit at the practice, who the primary doctor is that they're assigned to within your practice, as well as their chart number. Now, if you want to modify these fields, maybe you want to show their next visit or their insurance or something like that, that is what you would use this property for. Now, that does require that you know the database table names for the data that you want to display, so you may need to call technical support or ask your implementation manager if you choose to modify these fields. Now, the next option that we want to look at under our portal properties are the menu tabs. So I'm going to choose the property Portal Menu Submenus. And when we look here again at our portal, now we're looking at this section right below the band. Now again, these are all of the possible values by default. If you don't want the patient to have one of these features, you can use this property in two ways. One, at the modular level or the menu tabs, to either be displayed or hidden entirely, or two, within each of the menu tabs, you can limit what functionality within that module the patient can perform. So for instance, maybe your practice does not allow their patients to request appointments or refills from the portal. So we're simply going to get rid of those tabs entirely. But with regards to patient forms, maybe you are going to allow existing patients to fill out paperwork, but you don't want new patients to self-register. So we're going to leave the tab, but modify the submenu choices within. So the way this property works is, in the value field, the first part, prior to the colon, is the name that will display on the actual menu tab. This is the label the patient will actually see. So you can actually rename these if you prefer. And then following the colons, you'll notice that there are some 3-digit symbols. These are defined down here in the help for the property so that you can figure out exactly which option it is. And in order to get rid of the entire tab, such as in our example, we're going to get rid of the ability of requesting appointments and refills, you simply remove everything from the property value, and that will remove the entire menu tab. Since there's no tab present, there's no submenu options to worry about. But when it comes to the submenu choices then, we said that for patient forms, for instance, we weren't going to allow new patients to self-register, but we want to keep the regular patient forms. So down here in our help, we see that the prefix for new patient forms is PFRN. So I'm just going to get rid of that one symbol and leave the others. Then I'm just going to go ahead and save it. Now, as with a lot of our properties in Prognosis, you do have to log out and refresh to make them take effect. So back on the portal, I'm going to log Jessica out and then log back in. And notice across the top now, my appointment and prescription tabs are gone. And if I choose patient forms along the left, I do not have new patient form anymore. I've only got existing and legal documents. So that is how you can hide both a menu tab itself or modify the functionality within a tab for your patients based on your workflow as to what level of interaction you want them to have with you. And similarly, if you would like to add an option back, maybe after some time you decide you do want to let them request refills, you can just add it back in. And if you want to give them the appointment, again, we can log out and back in to make those changes take effect. So now I have my options back. So that gives you the ability of defining the precise functionality on the portal for your patients as to the workflow you want. Now, one other thing I want to mention with regards to the appointments, and this is actually going to be handled in a separate video, there is some additional administrative setup on the EHR side for the provider and the encounter type. So just giving them the ability of requesting appointments, you can even refine it further based on the type of appointment as well as the physician. I want to go back here to the summary for just a moment while we're talking about hiding menu options from the patient that we don't necessarily want them to have. The health summary corresponds to the face sheet. Now, for the patient on the portal, they can see their problem list, they can see their allergies, but at this level, they cannot modify it. It is read-only. So if you're going to give them the ability to modify the data, then that, of course, needs to be encompassed into our patient forms, which is what allows the patient to do data entry online to update their medical record in EHR. Now, maybe your specialty doesn't do health maintenance or immunizations, or maybe you don't want them to see their medical problems that you've assigned. You know, this is entirely subjective, again, based on your workflow. So when we go into the configuration piece, the property that we were just looking at was with regards to our menu submenus. Now we're dealing specifically with one of our submenus, so it is part of the overall portal parameters, and it's this property called summary.submenus. And similar to what we saw in the other property, we do have symbols or abbreviations of capital letters to represent the menu choices that are available, and they are defined down here in the text. You can sequence them however you want, but the sequence in which you enter them in the comma delimited list is how they will display to your patient. So maybe you don't want them to see their problem list at all. You don't care if they see their allergies. Maybe you don't do health maintenance or vaccinations in your practice, so you want to get rid of those. Then we can just go ahead and save it. And if we simply log out and back into the portal, you will see those changes take effect, just as we did with the other properties we configured. So now under our summary, we start with allergies instead of problem list, and we no longer have our vaccines or our past medical history. So you have the same flexibility even at the submenu level of withholding details from the patient if you want. Now, we're not going to discuss every property that is available, but you'll notice with all of our properties down here at the bottom, there is help that is specific to each one. So as you're going through your setup, if it's not clear to you what that particular property is intended for, the help will usually point you in that direction. We are going to look at a couple of them, however, that you may be interested in defining. For example, if you're going to allow your new patients to self-register from the patient portal, these first two properties work in conjunction with one another. The addNewPatient.active tag, for instance, will create a chart number within patient register in EHR in an active status so that you can then book appointments or start encounters. If it's set to no, however, although it will create a chart record, it will be inactive and therefore you will not be able to start an appointment or an encounter. At the same time, the self-registration message role allows you to create a custom user role, which can be assigned to one or more users who will then receive a system-generated alert notifying them of this new patient registration, so they can then do the appropriate follow-up prior to the visit. Now, for those of you who will be allowing your patients to request appointments from the portal, there are several properties involved. We're actually not going to go into those in this video because there's a separate video here on the Resource Center that deals specifically with requesting appointments from the portal. There's actually additional configuration and setup involved at the provider and encounter type level. Now, looking through some of these other properties, you'll notice that some of them accept a yes or no value, such as other info mandatory. This is yes or no, do you want the patient to answer their meaningful use required data? Whereas if you're going to allow them to update any of their basic information for patient register details, you can define which specific details you want them to update. Not by a yes or no indicator, but again, by following the acronyms down here in the text. P means that they are allowed to update their personal details, name, date of birth, etc. A for address, C for contact information, and O for other information. If you leave it blank, then the patient cannot modify it at all. Just scrolling down through a few of these others, we'll see here yes or no if you want them to be able to update their patient insurance. Now, with regards to sending messages to the doctor, we have different values incorporated into the help text as well. By default, all messages will go to the support personnel that is designated in your location master unless this property value is defined otherwise. And as the help text shows us, the values are A, for all providers within the practice as well as the support person, P, which would be only the primary doctor assigned to the patient under patient register as well as the support person, or S, which would be only the support person. Now, the support person can be a single human who is already a user in Prognosis, or what some clients have done is set up a general user, such as messages front desk or something to that effect, where all of the other users share the login so that they can share the load of responding to those messages. So this would be determined by your workflow and your preferences as to who is going to receive these messages and respond to them, or whether or not you want the patients to be able to message the doctors directly. We have whether or not you want the patient to see progress notes. There's a workflow with regards to the new patient registration or existing patients going through the new patient paperwork. In conjunction with the patient completing patient forms, there is a rule that you can define as to who will receive a message or a system alert that patient has completed paperwork, so that if you have someone in the office that needs to follow up, such as pre-certification or insurance coordinators prior to the appointment, you can assign a role, just as we talked about up above with regards to self-registration and appointments. They're notified that that paperwork has been submitted, and then they can start their task prior to the arrival. Now, these last two properties are with regards to lab and radiology test results. The test result dot before review is a yes or no property. If it is set to yes, then this means that the patient will be able to view their test results on the portal as soon as they are entered in the EHR, regardless of if the doctor has reviewed them or not. Now, that could be a concern if there are some alarming results in there that the doctor is not aware of yet that could alarm the patient. So if you set the property to no, then the results will not be displayed on the portal, even if they're entered in EHR, until after the doctor has reviewed them and marked them as such. And during that process, of course, individual test results can actually be hidden. So that gives you a little more control over what the patient is actually going to view. This, of course, works in conjunction with your workflow and preferences as to at what point you want your patients to see the results, which, of course, can eliminate a large volume of phone calls coming into your practice. The test result days property then determines how long results are displayed for the patient. By default, it's usually set to 6 months. But if you would like the patient to be able to see older results, As you see here in my training environment, I have it set to 2 years. Then you can, of course, set that property accordingly. So you see that there's a variety of properties here that allow you to control the level of interaction your patient has on the portal. Now, in addition to customizing the portal itself for the patient as to how they use it, you also have the ability of presenting the URL to the portal however you like. Now, this, of course, can be done, first of all, if you have a corporate website, you and your web designer can present it to your patient however you like. Here's a simple example of a patient portal page on a website where it defines what the portal does for the patient, and then there's a link for existing patients to log in, as well as a link for new patients to register. Of course, if you're only going to allow existing patients, you would not need that second link. Now, you can present this however you want. Now, another option is to embed the URL to the portal within the email that the patient receives with their user ID and password. I've logged in here to the EHR and gone into configuration. I'm going to choose under my output templates the master file email. And within my template search, I'm going to choose the one called login email for patient from registration. And this is the one that the patient receives when you create their user ID under the register login details icon. Now, we've already discussed in other videos the format of this email. I'm just going to go here and insert another sentence at the bottom that informs the patient how to access the URL. Of course, you can control the verbiage however you like for your practice. It becomes an interactive link within the body of the email, so the patient can click it directly from their email, or of course they could type it manually into their internet browser. Either way, remember the URL can be copy and pasted from the blue info button here in your system tray. So in review, with regards to defining the portal for your patients to interact with it, you can control the user interface of the landing page, which includes the patient band, the menu tabs, as well as the submenu options. You do this through the administrative properties on the EHR side, where you can enable or disable certain functions and behaviors. This is through a series of either yes/no values or specific values which are defined in the property help. The patient workflow is at your discretion whether you want to allow new patients to self-register or only allow existing patients to log into the portal. Both of them can then access their protected health information. And you can also customize the way the URL is presented to the client, either through a link on your corporate website or through the email template that includes their user ID and password.